The early morning wind swept across the scorched earth of Burkina Faso, drawing chaotic spirals of red dust into the air. Beneath the harsh sun, a figure appeared like a mirage. Her blonde hair, neatly braided in military style, glinted in the light as the white UN pickup truck screeched through the dust with tired resistance. She stepped out gracefully, cradling a white plastic container marked in bold red letters, "Emergency Medical Supplies, UNICEF Authorized." The soldiers at the checkpoint exchanged glances. No aid delivery had been scheduled. But she smiled, the kind of smile that was just trustworthy enough, neither forced nor excessive, a smile perfected in front of a mirror hundreds of times. Then in flawless French, polished as if she had just stepped out of a Sorbonne lecture hall, she said, "We're here to help." But in this land, help is a double-edged word. It can mean salvation. It can also mean shackles. And Colonel Ibrahim Traoré knew that better than anyone. In the shade of the fortress walls, he watched, still expressionless. His eyes had seen 3 coups, dozens of failed assassinations, and countless Western promises of assistance. Yet no one ever offered help so promptly. No one ever appeared just days after a classified meeting attended by only 6 people. A woman, a box of medicine, a rehearsed smile, and one question growing louder in his mind: why no gunfire? No bloodshed. But the war had already begun the moment the UN vehicle touched the ground. They called her Dr. Sarah Magnuson, a specialist from the International Medical Relief Organization. A spotless record, a flawless resume. She came because of an alleged outbreak risk. But there was no outbreak, no health reports, no aid requests sent. There had only been one thing: a secret meeting on the increasing infiltration of European intelligence agencies in the region. 6 people knew. 6 trusted individuals. So how, within 3 days, did a Western doctor arrive armed with equipment, a smile, and a story too smooth to be true? The answer would not be found in the medical box. It would lie in what she hid beneath the humanitarian fabric. Because sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun, it's a gaze that knows too much. Not every medical kit is salvation. Some are swords wrapped in the silk of compassion. And in a land where trust is the rarest currency, a man like Traoré cannot allow anyone to walk in unchallenged. No one. When trust becomes a luxury, Burkina Faso is no longer a stranger to international headlines. A landlocked nation, poor in resources, yet central to a tangled web of West African geopolitical strategies. From the northern desert stretching to the Mali border to the transnational transport corridors, everything here sits within the sights of global powers. Not because they cherish Burkina Faso's democracy, but because this land controls a security corridor stretching from the Atlantic coast to the heart of the Sahara. 3 coups in under a decade, each with a different justification: corruption, terrorism, civil unrest. But for Ibrahim Traoré, who rose to power after the most recent upheaval, every excuse led to the same truth. Domestic power was being manipulated by forces beyond the borders. He was once an artillery officer, a man of humble origins, trained in the old military style, disciplined, cautious, and deeply skeptical. Not the type of politician who graces television screens with polished rhetoric. He was a man of the field, where people are measured by their reaction to gunfire, not by diplomas or debate scores. After assuming power, Traoré didn't launch into flashy reforms. He quietly strengthened internal surveillance, cut off dubious aid channels, and most importantly, kept his distance from international NGOs. To him, humanitarianism is necessary but never exempt from scrutiny, because he had seen relief trucks carrying surveillance gear, had read medical support reports extracting biometric data from civilians, and he understood what many young leaders often overlook. In Africa, wherever help arrives uninvited, a battlefield of espionage may already exist. That's why when Dr. Sarah Magnuson appeared, beautiful, impeccably credentialed, her words laced with sugar, he didn't see humanitarian light. He saw one thing: the terrifying precision of timing. 3 days prior, he had held a classified meeting with his 6 most trusted aides. No documents, no electronic devices. They discussed suspicious patterns in cross-border telecom networks, signals suggesting interference likely from European satellites. Now, exactly 72 hours later, a Western medical worker shows up unannounced, unsolicited, and without a single formal request from the Ministry of Health. Coincidence to someone else, perhaps. But to Traoré, coincidence was just the polite word for implantation. The base he commanded, a central military compound, contained most of the defense deployment maps for northern Burkina Faso bypass routes, ammunition depot locations, high-ranking officer lists, and satellite comm schematics. Anyone hoping to prepare for something, a foreign intervention, a coup, or a black ops mission, would need precisely that kind of data. And now a doctor uninvited arrives with unverified medical equipment. It triggered a question in Traoré's mind, not loud, not clear, but sharp like the slice of a narrow blade. Could this be the first signal of something much bigger? He didn't act immediately. In modern warfare, weapons are never the first to fire, and information is. And sometimes silence is the only way to make the enemy reveal what they never expected to be discovered. The night before meeting her, he jotted a single line in his old leather notebook, not for anyone else to read, just as a reminder to himself, unconditional aid does not exist in politics. And if someone says they're here out of human kindness, ask what equipment they're carrying. And the next morning she arrived with a white box of medicine, a syrupy smile, and something he couldn't yet name, but was certain wasn't just medical. The woman from Paris, she walked through the gate as if she had done it 100 times before. No hesitation, no scanning glances, no nervous pause despite stepping into a semi-militarized zone. Even seasoned UN personnel sometimes flinch in the face of rifles, in the skeptical gazes of African soldiers. But she, Dr. Sarah Magnuson, did not. The guard gave her badge and passport a quick glance. Everything matched. She was a doctor, a representative of the International Medical Relief Organization, with prior deployments to hot zones ranging from the floodplains of South Sudan to refugee camps in Syria. Her French wasn't just fluent, it carried the intonation of Parisian academia, smooth, unbroken, untainted by African dialects. But what the guard remembered most wasn't her documents or her voice. It was her eyes, ice blue, emotionless. Not cold, but unmistakably calculating. The white plastic container in her arms was stamped emergency medical supplies. She handled it with absolute precision, as if it contained blood capable of saving hundreds of lives, or something that if dropped once could shatter her entire cover. Ibrahim Traoré observed from a distance, choosing not to intervene. He let the procedures unfold, ID verification, basic cargo check, escort to the field clinic. But he watched her every step. And soon he began to notice things that didn't add up. First sign, her movement. She didn't walk like a healthcare worker. Every step was measured deliberate like a military instructor. Back straight, feet never slamming into the ground. To a trained soldier, that wasn't the gait of a doctor. It was the gait of someone who had undergone tactical training. Second sign, her eyes. They accidentally skimmed over comm stations, antennae, surveillance posts, and emergency exits. No one noticed, except Traoré. She didn't pause, didn't record, just looked. But she looked at the right targets at exactly the right moments. And someone who had dismantled multiple assassination plots knew. That's not casual curiosity. That's the reflex of a person trained to memorize tactical layouts. Once brought to the reception lounge, she showcased another skill conversation. Sarah Magnuson didn't speak much, but every word she chose made people feel comfortable. She asked soldiers about their health, inquired about population density around the base, the most common illnesses in the area, and living conditions for military personnel. Nothing was inappropriate, nothing rude. But when you lay her questions side by side with a standard field intel form, they lined up almost perfectly. Then came the moment that transformed Traoré's suspicions into full alert. She knew the name of a retired medical officer who had left the post a year ago. Was Lieutenant Colonel Goudinet once in charge of this clinic? She asked gently. Goudinet was the only person to have ever worked with an international organization at this base. That detail wasn't available in any public report. Traoré knew because he had personally ordered Goudinet's name scrubbed from all open files after uncovering a data leak. He said nothing, just nodded and smiled. But inside, every alarm had gone off. He signaled his internal intelligence officer with a glance, surveil her. Let her believe we haven't noticed. A blonde woman, icy eyes, a trained stride, a Parisian voice, a calibrated smile, and an uncorroborated database of knowledge about his base. Not a single action was suspicious, not one word overstepped. And yet it was precisely this perfection that sent a chill down his spine. Because in the age of information warfare, the most dangerous person is not the one who shouts, "I'm here to destroy." It's the one who smiles and softly says, "I'm just here to help." Every detail felt off. On the second day, the cracks began to show, small but undeniable. Sarah Magnuson started working. She requested permission to set up a temporary medical screening station inside the base. Her reasoning, the need to rapidly screen for symptoms of an unidentified respiratory illness. She spoke to the liaison officer in a calm voice, emphasizing urgency. Every hour of delay could cost lives, she warned. She stressed speed. But for anyone familiar with international medical organizations, Traoré knew one thing. No NGO ever moves that fast unless under orders from someone far above. They usually need paperwork, government coordination, time to assess terrain weather logistics. But she arrived with no authorization from the Ministry of Health, no request from any regional authorities. No confirmation from any Burkina Faso government agency. And still she was asking to set up a medical post. When Sarah was taken to the base's main clinic, a simple concrete hut outfitted with basic emergency care gear. She didn't complain. In fact, she smiled and said, "This will work perfectly," a harmless remark. But the next sentence is what set off the warning lights in Traoré's team. "Let me install my equipment. I'll need at least an hour to calibrate. If possible, I'd like to begin screening your personnel this afternoon." That afternoon, no one, not even UN health teams, had ever asked to examine troops within hours of arrival. Standard protocols, preliminary checks, population assessment, infection, control, models, referral systems take at least 48 hours. Traoré nodded, but inside his mind, pieces began falling into place, a timeline that felt all too familiar. On a classified meeting 3 days earlier, discussing the possibility of Western intelligence infiltration. 2. Only 6 individuals were aware, all isolated, no electronics. 3. The next day, the internal satellite system detected a strange signal. Weak, untraceable. 4. On the third day she arrived, with medical gear and a plan to examine every soldier on base. No outbreak, no symptoms, no demand for care, and yet a full plan to access every troop, collect biological data, observe behavior, perhaps even implant devices. Traoré issued a silent order. Assigned Sergeant Konaté, trained in counterintelligence, to accompany Sarah under the guise of medical assistance. His task: observe, not interfere, and memorize every piece of equipment she brought. That afternoon, the first report from Konaté arrived at HQ. She spent nearly 20 minutes positioning a strange device in the middle of the room. No screen, no wires, just a signal light and an antenna. Traoré asked for a clearer description. Small, round, metallic, like a transmitter or sensor. "I've worked over 10 years in military medicine. This didn't resemble any known medical device." Traoré immediately ordered his tech team to monitor radiation levels and radio frequencies in the area. Soon a crucial update came in. The device emitted a weak, compressed signal in cyclical bursts, similar to a relay or a ping used for location tracking. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. Traoré requested a full review of Sarah's movements over the past 5 years, cross-referenced with intelligence Burkina Faso had received from Central and Southern African partners. The findings gave him pause. Sarah had been present in Tigray, Ethiopia, 3 weeks before armed conflict erupted. Goma, DRC, 10 days before UN peacekeepers were ambushed. Tripoli, Libya, 2 days after a U.S. airstrike on a suspected terrorist facility. Each time she entered under humanitarian credentials. And each time she left right before or after the region shifted in a way that benefited the West. Coincidence number: Traoré did not believe in coincidences. That night he didn't sleep. Instead, he ordered a sweep of all signal transmissions within a 10-kilometer radius of the base. He approved covert audio surveillance in Sarah's room under the guise of protecting our guest. And then at 11:30 p.m., the radar lit up with abnormal activity. A data burst lasting exactly 7 minutes was transmitted straight to a satellite belonging to a European telecom conglomerate previously suspected of ties to Western intelligence networks. No one said a word. No one made a move. But in Ibrahim Traoré's mind, the question, who is she, was officially replaced by a chilling certainty: she didn't come to heal. She came to extract. And just like that, a war with no bullets fired had entered phase 2. The gift in the box, the field medical room, was still lit when the clock struck 11 p.m. Sarah Magnuson was hunched over a white plastic case, the same one she had clutched like it held the last hope for an entire imaginary community of patients. What she didn't know was that every movement she made unwrapping layers, peeling back foam pads, was being watched by 4 pairs of eyes and recorded by 3 hidden microphones discreetly placed around the room. Sarah worked in silence, neither rushed nor cautious. She moved like someone preparing diagnostic equipment. But for anyone experienced in assembling medical tech, her motions felt off. No power checks, no calibration of biosensors, no sterilization. Instead, she was focused almost entirely on a small, compact silver device buried deep beneath the medication layers. In the adjacent room, Sergeant Konate, pretending to be asleep, caught a glimpse of the device's top round. Flat, 4 antennas arranged in an X pattern. A row of LEDs blinking in a precise rhythm. He had never seen any legitimate medical device built like that, but he had seen short-range satellite transmitters. What Sarah was setting up was a disguised transmission node, the kind built to operate autonomously beam data into the stratosphere in under 10 minutes and self-delete its memory once the mission was complete. The signal lit up. Blue. Steady pulses, like a mechanical heartbeat. And just like that, a large data packet silently left Burkina Faso headed to a satellite 36,000 kilometers away. At that same moment, in another room within the base, Ibrahim Traoré sat still in front of a monitor. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just watched. On the screen, a technician mapped out the signal pattern, a transmission just strong enough to reach mid-orbit, short enough to evade instant detection by American military satellites that monitored the Sahel. Traoré didn't need to ask what she sent. He only needed to know to whom, at what time, from which device. Now he had all 3 answers. The next morning, Sarah appeared in full medical uniform. Bright face, gentle movements. She smiled warmly at the young soldiers lining up for health screening, perhaps believing she'd passed the test. Then Traoré entered, unannounced. No escort. Just a thin folder in hand and a face carved from stone. As he stepped into the field clinic, he looked straight into Sarah's eyes slowly, as if dissecting her every micro-expression. "Shall we begin the screening today, Colonel?" she asked, her usual soft smile intact. He didn't answer right away. He glanced at the half-empty white case. Then he spoke low, calm, undeniable. "There's a very interesting device you installed last night, with antennas, with data transmission capabilities, and it operated for exactly 7 minutes at 11:30 p.m. Her expression didn't shift, at least not for the first 0.3 seconds. But then her eyes flickered. A flash of calculation, instant sharp. But Traoré had sparred with intelligence officers before. He knew the look, she understood, and she was now calculating her exit route. Modern medical equipment can be misunderstood. "Colonel," she replied slowly, "I was only preparing for screening procedures. No data was transmitted." Traoré nodded, no retort. He stepped over to the box. Layer by layer, he removed the cotton pads, then the medicine vials, and finally at the very bottom, the device still softly glowing blue. He turned to her, and for the first time, his gaze turned cold. "No doctor carries this device. No humanitarian agency is authorized to use it, and there is no medical rationale that justifies hiding it beneath medicine." Silence. For those few moments, the room was so quiet you could hear the wind slicing through cracked concrete walls. Traoré knew she wasn't thinking of how to explain. She was calculating. Could she go all in? Could she bluff her way out? And if she did, who would come to save her? No one. Not here. Not after being caught red-handed. And certainly not when the man across from her was Ibrahim Traoré, a leader Western magazines once described as a man who only smiles when he already knows all the answers. "Don't call me doctor." No one in the field clinic said a word after the device was lifted from the bottom of the box. Sarah Magnuson stood, frozen arms limp at her sides, eyes fixed on the device, as if it had just betrayed her. But Traoré knew that device hadn't betrayed anyone. It simply wasn't fast enough to outwit a man who had seen through too many layers of deception. With a calm gesture, he signaled. 2 officers entered, not pointing weapons, not issuing threats. They simply stood there, silent proof that the game was over. "Do you have anything to say?" Traoré asked. His voice was even low, devoid of emotion. Sarah tried to smile, but the corners of her lips twitched unevenly. "I don't understand what you're talking about," she replied. Traoré didn't react. He opened a thin folder. Inside were satellite images captured at the exact moment the transmission occurred. A burst of data light pointed precisely to the coordinates of a civilian satellite owned by a European telecom corporation. Next came hidden camera photos of the device, then recordings of her voice working late at night. You transmitted data last night. Details about the base map, soldier count, antenna positions, communication gear, troop density, and one odd command string, Night-Andale Protocol. Primary target confirmed accessible. His voice remained soft, but suddenly the room felt smaller, the air heavier like it could shatter inside your chest. Sarah sat down and for the first time looked genuinely small. She said nothing, didn't move. I've seen liars before, Traoré continued, but never one this skilled. You are a real doctor. Your credentials are real, but your reason for being here isn't. Silence. Then she raised her head. Her voice was hoarse, stripped of all diplomatic tone. I'm not authorized to reveal the organization I work for. You don't need to, he replied. I already know. I just want to know why now. Why choose this moment? Why think I wouldn't find out? Sarah took a deep breath. Maybe to steady herself. Maybe to accept that all she could do now was choose how to lose face with the least disgrace. Mr. Traoré, she said, yes, I'm a doctor, but I was also trained to do more than treat patients. I collect data in regions of potential instability to assess threat levels to strategic interests. Whose interests? He asked directly. She hesitated. Nations that have reasons to care about stability in West Africa. No nation cares without wanting control, and no nation seeks control without first trying to eliminate people like me. That line stopped her cold. I don't plan military operations, she said slowly. I just provide information. But I believe if I didn't do it, someone else would, and they might be worse. You think I'll sympathize with the if not me, then someone else argument. You think a white coat will excuse blatant espionage. No, I don't, but I do know you're not someone who acts impulsively. Traoré smiled, his first smile, but it wasn't gentle. Correct, I won't act on impulse. I'll act on the truth. He motioned to the technician. The camera switched on. The red recording light blinked, declaring that anonymity was over. We will record everything you, the device, the confession, and send it to every global media outlet, from Al Jazeera to RT, from Press TV to independent geopolitical bloggers in the global south. You can't, she gasped. It'll destroy the entire network. It'll make every humanitarian worker a suspect. You destroyed it, he replied, when you chose to use the mask of mercy to serve intelligence interests. She said nothing. Traoré's voice dropped, but each word was sharp, etched in steel. You are not a doctor. Not after this. You're a courier, a living USB drive, a satellite with blonde hair. Sarah looked at him, and in her eyes for the first time flickered something almost like respect. You're the only one who's ever caught me. No, he said, I'm just the only one who dared to expose you. The final call. By the next morning, the news had spread faster than the sun. The video had been broadcast from the base's media center, bypassing all major media filters. No editing, no commentary, just raw footage. Sarah Magnuson seated in the field clinic, her face stripped of the confidence she had carried on her first day. In front of her, the exposed espionage device on the table. Behind her, two silent officers. And in front of the camera, Ibrahim Traoré, no uniform, no insignia, just a gray khaki shirt. Ladies and gentlemen, he said in the recording, what you are about to see is not a film. This is reality where someone used the guise of medicine to conduct military intelligence operations. He never said her name, never used the word spy, never insulted her. He let the images and evidence speak for him. The video was only 5 minutes long. But when it began circulating across African media platforms and then spread to strategic think tanks in Latin America and the Middle East, it became an information bombshell. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was cold, methodical, and precise. Traoré never screamed betrayal. He simply asked, can international humanitarian organizations still be trusted if they allow themselves to be used like this? And if a military base like ours hadn't detected it, how many other bases have already been exploited without ever knowing? Within 48 hours, over 30 international health organizations operating in West Africa were forced to issue public statements. Some suspended operations immediately to conduct internal reviews. The foreign ministry of a certain European country, unnamed but widely guessed, summoned Burkina Faso's envoy for a private discussion regarding misleading media content. Burkina Faso's response was simple. We merely replayed what the camera recorded. Sarah Magnuson was not put on trial. She wasn't handcuffed. No military police. She was escorted out of the base in a United Nations vehicle, an action Traoré described as returning the violating individual to their parent state. But before she left, she was handed a letter, handwritten in classical French, personally signed by Ibrahim Traoré. No one knows what the letter said, but in the moment she read it, the camera caught a flicker of moisture in her eyes. 1 week later, she vanished. No social media, no announcements, no resignation from any organization. Groups that had once worked with her immediately scrubbed her name from public records. In intelligence circles, they said Sarah had been mission frozen, which meant she was still alive, but no longer active. She had been removed from the board not by bullets, but by a truth aired in daylight. Traoré didn't celebrate. He made no further statement about the incident. But after the video, no organization dared enter his base without passing through 3 levels of verification. And at border zones, security forces intensified inspections of relief shipments, not to block aid, but to ensure the mask of humanitarianism did not hide the teeth of sabotage. A European newspaper wrote, he didn't just catch a spy, he forced an entire intelligence apparatus to re-examine its methods. A Brazilian security analysis channel concluded, for the first time, a West African state exposed the truth using Western tactics evidence video and a complete lack of emotional overreach. And in Burkina Faso, the people began calling him by a new name, the man who could read a smile. The cost of misplaced trust. No gunshot was fired that day. No blood spilled. No grand-scale arrests, no executions. And yet an entire espionage network was dismantled, not through force, but through the sharp silence of a man who could see beyond polite words. Traoré didn't set a trap. He simply let the enemy step into their own footprints. And in doing so, he left behind a lesson the world, though fully aware, has long chosen to ignore. Let one truth be made clear. Sarah Magnuson was not evil in the traditional sense. She was a product of a system, a world where intelligence operations no longer rely on agents in dark glasses or guns under coats, but instead use humanitarianism, medicine, and education as facades too noble to reject. She didn't lie out of malice. She lied because she had been trained to believe it was necessary. And that is what makes the game so dangerous. Because when humanitarian organizations originally created to save lives are used as tools for strategic information, gathering the damage goes far beyond an exposed spy. The real cost is the collapse of trust. Traoré understood this. He didn't want to turn the story into Burkina Faso versus the West. He simply wanted to send a message. If you wear the white coat, act like a healer. Don't use it to hide a blade. His public action alarmed many. Several NGOs felt collateral damage. They were subjected to more scrutiny, tougher questions, heightened suspicion. But that was not Traoré's fault. That was the price of a single misplaced trust. And then came the final question, what did this entire event teach us? It's not about who was right or wrong. It's about this. If you are a leader, a commander, or simply a citizen in a place being helped, you have the right to ask questions. Because sometimes what arrives in a box marked relief is not medicine. It might be a map, a hidden camera, or a question you are not ready to answer. Today, the world no longer has clear lines between peace and war. The battle for influence, for information, is more silent than ever. And in that shadow war, those who can see past friendly smiles and recognize camouflage will defend their sovereignty, not with bullets, but with wisdom. Sarah Magnuson is gone, but her shadow, her programmed smile, her scanning eyes remains a vivid warning for those who stay behind. A reminder that true kindness never needs to hide devices under bandages. And if it must, then it was never kindness at all. And you, if one day you find an unmarked box of medicine in a war zone, will you inspect it or will you trust it? Share this story, because when trust is betrayed, it doesn't just shake one nation, it shakes us all.